was liming with some old men before the election. And well, I was amazed of their discussion. They were discussing the election of 2025. How Africans were selling sheep on UNC, buying dead or alive. One old man shouted out, fellas, give me your attention. UNC can't win by themselves, no election. You see, they're sitting and they're planning to make a decision. So she called out Shilaga, the old FIFA wanted man. She said, call the trade union, let we start negotiations. And we could call out a big sale and we go buy out some Africans. Africans for sale, we buying the buyers. Africans for sale, we buying Africans. She don't have all she lal chance, and she the on rhymes. Now all she need is some slave names, man, some big strong Africans. Africans for sale, we buying Africans. Africans for sale, so they go on Trinidad. UNC sitting and they're waiting patiently. With about 16 safe seats, they don't win that already. The woman said, I have my people and they are born UNC. Now all I need is some Africans who got their names out of slavery. She said that she hear they're really selling cheap. And she could buy them very cheap, 500 and a jersey. A lot of people will cry when she's finished with CPEP. Cause she is not holding back them PNM have nothing to get. She said it's party before country, all you never forget. She will fend for her people and she have no blasted regrets. Africans for sale, we buying Africans. Africans for sale, we coming, we buying Africans. They like crab in a barrel, they pulling each other down. She said, but I want the vote, so I jam them the winning song. Africans for sale, we buying good or bad. Africans for sale, so they go on Trinidad. Oh, who called me? The black mines in Tobago, she's working on them with ease. But she's not afraid, because monkey say cool breeze. She said the last time she was easy, this time there is no room for mistake. Cause when she's done with Tobago, boy, it's either they make or break. She has her eyes on Moruga, especially Samuel Cooper. They got a lot of PNM houses, but none of them can remember. She's buying some in 6 Company because they're nice, they're bad and they're trim. Their ancestors came from Africa and all of them is Americans. She passed through 5th Company, boy, she bunks up my dingo. Well, boy, she makes she name cause she gets Africans for soul. Africans for sale, they're buying Africans. Africans for sale, we buying Africans. Don't fight a bad was pretty, Sirosha with her in this cemetery. He sit down waiting for refinery. Boy, this man has to be crazy. Africans for sale, we buying good or bad. Africans for sale, so they go on Trinidad. Hey, come on, man. Somebody pinch me. She said my people are loyal, they don't vote for other parties. But them PNM people just show them some money, stag and roti. She said I have my safe seats in the safe hands of Caroni. Shigwana Vancouver, straight down to Sipari. I love my people, for 10 years they out in the rain. But when I get back in there, things will never be the same. To all of my people, you must get your rightful place. And I don't care who's sitting there and think I am talking race. You all know what's hurting me. You see that Dr. Rowley? We didn't hide up all we money. Did that man change the currency? Hey, Africans for sale, for sale. They buying Africans. They buy Africans for sale, for sale, for sale. We buying Africans. We bought out PSA. We got them for 10%. Now I could beat my chest and laugh, cause I know it's money well spent. Africans for sale, for sale, for sale. We buying good or bad. We buying good or bad. Africans for sale, for sale, for sale. So they go on Trinidad. Oh, who called me? In Tobago, she's working on them with ease, but she's not afraid because monkey say cool breeze. She said the last time she was easy, this time there is no room for mistake, cause when she's done with Tobago, boy, it's either they make or break. She has her eyes on Moruga, especially Samuel Cooper. They got a lot of PNM houses, but none of them can remember. She's buying some in 6 company because they're nice, they're bad and they trim. Their ancestors came from Africa and all of them is Americans. She passed through 5 company, boy, she bunks up my dingo. Well, boy, she mentioned him cause she gets Africans for soul. Africans for sale, for sale, for sale. They buying Africans. Africans for sale, for sale, for sale. We buying Africans. Tough eyes are bad, was pretty. Sirosia with her reach in the cemetery. He sit down waiting for refinery. Boy, this man has to be crazy. Africans for sale, for sale. We buying good or bad. Africans for sale, for sale, for sale. So they go on Trinidad. Hey, call me. Somebody pinch me. She said my people are loyal, they don't vote for other parties. But them PNM people just show them some money, stag and roti. She said I have my safe seats in the safe hands of Caroni. Shigwana Vancouver, straight down to Sipari. I love my people, for 10 years they out in the rain. But when I get back in there, things will never be the same. To all of my people, you must get your rightful place. And I don't care who's sitting there and think I am talking race. You all know what's hurting me. You see that Dr. Rowley? We didn't hide up all we money. Did that man change the currency? Hey, Africans for sale, for sale. They buying Africans. They buy Africans for sale, for sale, for sale. We buying Africans. We bought out PSA. We got them for 10%. Now I could beat my chest and laugh, cause I know it's money well spent. Africans for sale, for sale, for sale. We buying good or bad. Africans for sale, for sale, for sale. So they go on Trinidad.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Africans for sale. A stag, some roti, and some money. Africans for sale, $500 on a jersey. Queen Victoria out of Trinidad. That calypso caused a stir in Trinidad. They banned it from the semi-finals. I think they banned it from the airwaves because they say too racist. My Lord God. Africans for sale. You see why I love reggae. I love all the other musical genres that God has inspired our people to give to the world. But I tell you, this calypso thing, they can nothing beat it. Africans for sale. Queen Victoria, they're speaking about vote buying at the last election in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, we in Guyana, we know about vote buying. I'm now catching on to some of our local calypsos. I know we had the Monarch the other night, and we have a winner and so forth. I'm now trying to, catch some of the calypsos and so forth. But in Trinidad, there is the Calypsonian Queen Victoria, she calls herself, and she's singing there about vote buying. Vote buying. And you all know that we had vote buying in Guyana. Even GCOM had to step in at one time and warn against vote buying. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. For the record, the Calypsonian has said it. You know, the UNC in Trinidad looking for big, strong Africans to say, well, look, you all know I love Black people. I love my African identity. I'm going to defend it at all costs. I think Kwame McCoy said in Parliament, David Hines represents only one class. All right? Yes, he may be talking about the working class and one kind, unless he's talking about Black people as a class. And it may have jumped out that Black people is a class. You know, Kwame, he said David Hines represents one class and one kind. Well, he may be saying that Black people is a class, low class. I'm not saying, is that what he's saying? Black people is low class? Because David Hines represents one class. They say that I represent Black people alone, right? All right, and one kind. So maybe the kind he's talking about is Black people. I don't have any problem. I have no shame, as I said last night, about representing Black people. Even if it's me alone got to do it, I gonna do it, right? Somebody got to represent Black people as Black people. I'm not saying that others don't represent Black people. Others may represent Black people as workers. Some may represent Black people as social class. Some may represent Black people as scrapers. I don't know. But I represent Black people as part of my constituency and represent their dignity and their identity. Does it mean that I don't feel for other races? I do. I feel for other races. I think Amerindians are being beaten down, but Amerindians have people representing them and speaking for them. God bless them. On the government side, on both the opposition parties, have Amerindians speaking for them. And if Amerindians are under attack, I will defend them. That's what I do. I defend. I can't represent Amerindians in the way that their own will represent them in Parliament and other fora, but I will defend Amerindian people when they're under attack. By the same token, I East Indians have people to represent them. The PPP is very clear that it represents East Indians. They are on the opposition side. There are East Indians there who represent East Indian interests. And I can't jump in and represent East Indians, but I will defend East Indians when they're under attack, as I did in the past when a black government was in power and East Indian people said they were oppressed. I fought on their side. So Kwame is right. I represent black people. I represent black people dignity. I represent black people interest, but I defend the dignity of all races, all races. So I just want to make that very, very clear to this country. And I will continue to represent the interests of African Guyanese, continue to represent their dignity. That is not the only thing I represent. During my budget speech, I sounded a warning representing public servants and other workers. And public servants are predominantly African, but there are some Indian public servants. And I didn't make a distinction between African public servants and Indian public servants. I represent public servants as workers, as a category of workers that are being left out and locked out. And so I represent their interests. Perhaps the aspect of my budget presentation that got the attention was when I represented the University of Guyana, arguing that the University of Guyana, our premier university, is being starved of funds. And so therefore I called for a slashing of the gold scholarship funds and give some of that money to the University of Guyana. I argue that some of the gold scholarships should be steered to UG. That is, instead of somebody doing a master's in education at some foreign university, UG offers masters in education. Let them do it at the University of Guyana, and that money that you are giving to the university overseas, you give that money to UG. You see, so I represent different and varying interests. I represent workers. I represent the institution, the University of Guyana. In that sense, I'm representing students and workers there at the University of Guyana. And I represent Africans. It's not the only group that I represent, but I represent Africans because I recognize that we live in a country in which people are afraid to raise their voices and to represent Africans. And I have decided, in the tradition of UC Kwayana and Walter Rodney and others, to continue that tradition, that as part of our advocacy, we must advocate not only for class inequality and class equality, we must advocate for ethnic equality. And so therefore, I have no shame. But I go back to the Calypso, Africans for Sale. The Calypsonian is raising the issue of vote buying. And I didn't know that it was such a prevalent thing in Trinidad and Tobago until somebody sent me this Calypso, a brother. I'm not going to call his name. He's a political leader, and he knows of my interest in Calypso, and he was the one that drew my attention to this Calypso. And like I said, I usually keep up with what's happening in the Calypso world in Trinidad and Guyana. But this year I got busy with the Parliament thing, and I wasn't keeping up with what's happening in the tents. And so I didn't realize Queen Victoria, who has been around for the last 25 years. She has never really won a Calypso crown, but she's one of the strong voices for social commentary, social and political commentary in Trinidad and Tobago. And so therefore, I was able to tune in and to realize what was happening. That TUCO, the Calypso body, First of all, they placed her 13th when many people felt that she should have been placed higher and she should have been going to the Dimanche Gras, which is the final of the Calypso competition there in Trinidad and Tobago. And then they eliminated the song because they said the song was too racist. And I think they've banned it on some of the airwaves. Now, again, we had the experience last year of the Ministry of Education and Culture, I think, or the Ministry of Culture, banning calypsos from a young child who was singing in the calypso competition last year because they felt that the content, because the child was singing about cost of living and the teacher strike that was going on around this time last year, and they banned the calypso. Now, in Trinidad and Tobago, they've always had this controversy, especially when the UNC, which is the Indian-based party, has been there in power. On Indian interest group, you go right back to Sparrow's Marajin, way back in the 1970s, and when some of the Indian cultural groups said Sparrow was desecrating Indian womanhood because he was projecting them as sex symbols. Marajin, some of you all will remember Marajin, and so forth. The man who invented soca, Rashortiai, himself got into trouble for depicting Indian women in a certain way, but they were never banned. And we come right through to Crow Crow and Sugar Aloes and Watchman, who became the renegades in Calypso in the 1990s and 2000s, and they began to sing on race and ethnicity. And there were calls to ban their Calypso, but they were never banned. And this now, Tuco has banned this Calypso by Queen Victoria. She has taken them to court. But you know, in the colonial days, they banned Calypso. They felt it was subversive. And so here we are in post-colonial Caribbean, where Calypsos are being banned again in Trinidad and Guyana. And, you know, it's an East Indian-based government in Trinidad, East Indian-based government in Guyana, engaging in this banning of an art form that is essentially an African art form. Now, we have the art form has expanded, and more Indians are singing Calypso. We have chutney, soca, and so forth. But it remains essentially an African art form, an area of Indian-based government that are engaging in censorship and banning and so forth. It's famously in Trinidad, the Calypsonians used to sing a lot on Eric Williams. They used to call him Deafy. Deafy, you know, he was what we would call in local parlance, he was hearing impaired, you know, hard of hearing, we say in the villages, but he was hearing impaired, and he wore a hearing aid, and they used to call him Deafy. And they say that Eric used to say, "Let the jackasses bray." He never attempted to ban Calypso or any Calypso that sang on him. And people like Chalk Dust and so on sang on Eric almost every day. Every year they pounded Eric Williams. Never did. Sad day that in the Caribbean, we are there banning Calypso on the question of race. Trinidad tends to be more liberal on the discussion of race in the public space than Guyana. But Trinidad has now gone there under this UNC government. When Pandey had first come to government in 1995, he had attempted to ban a lot of Calypsos and Crow Crow and Sugar Aloes and Watchman, in particular those three, but others. They got into a lot of back and forth with Pandey. And now Madam Pandey's successor, the prime minister, she now was influenced because clearly Tuko encountered these calypsos before, but it's taken its cue. And so, you know, it's the issue of the political superstructure, the political directory. Sometimes it doesn't have to tell people to do things. It doesn't have to tell organizations to do things. The organizations do what they think the political directorate would want them to do. And so here we are. The Calypsonian is singing about vote buying. What is racist about that? You see, you have to engage the topic. The topic is vote buying. Africans are the most vulnerable to vote buying in Trinidad. They don't have a big indigenous population there, Amerindians. So Africans are the most vulnerable to vote buyer, to this thing of vote buying. And they're targeted by vote buyers. Here in Guyana, the Amerindian community and the African community were targeted by vote buyers at the last election. None other than former President Donald Ramotar said what happened at our last election is that the PPP beat the Bush and Win got PPP beat the Bush and Win catch the board. That's how former President Ramotar puts it. And I have to agree with him that the notion of vote buying was introduced by the PPP. And one is not talking here. There was always what they used to call in the old days the sardine and canned beef kind of politics. The Yara, I understand, used to come into the black communities and share out sardine and canned beef and to get people to buy. And I'm told that in my village here, Teacher George Young, you know, because one people used to take the sardine and the canned beef and so on. And Teacher George Young said, "The black man too licorice. They got some black man licorice," you know. So there was always small instances of vote buying, but it never became an issue until the PPP, realizing that the Indian majority was being decreased, and there was need to attract voters from other ethnic groups, decided that the way to go is to target Africans and to actually take advantage of their impoverished state and give them money in exchange for their votes. The PPP started that, and it rose to heights at the last election, running up to the last election. They were giving the contracts to these young men, young African men, who knew they didn't have to have any skill, any contract experience. They just give them these couple $1 million contract in exchange for their votes. And apparently some Africans went along with the game. And then other parties saw what the PPP was doing and apparently got into it. People are telling me that these parties would turn up in communities on the quarantine, far away from Georgetown. And they would turn up with trunks, car trunk. When they open their car trunk, you get money in grip, suitcase. And they would be sharing these monies out in African villages. I am now hearing these things that happen, especially in Region 5, Region 6, Region 7, Region 10. I'm sure it happened in Region 4, but it seems as though that they targeted these regions, Region 10, Region 7, Region 6, Region 5, and then they targeted the Amerindian areas. I am now hearing that vote buying has long been an issue in Amerindian areas. You see, and the whole notion of vote buying arises out of the assumptions about the groups. The assumption that all you got to do is give Africans some rum and roti and some money, and you're all right with them. As the Calypsonian Queen Victoria said, $500 in a jersey, rum, roti, and you get the African vote. So the assumption that these groups, you can buy them. You see, that is where the racism comes, is your assumption of people that drives you in a certain direction. The assumption that Amerindians, you can go and I would hear politicians say, well, those people in the interior, the last person who go and give them an outboard engine or give them this, will get their vote. So the assumptions that are made about Amerindian people, the assumptions that are made about African people, the assumptions that are made about East Indian people determines the political attitude to them. I hear that when you want to buy vote in the Indian community, you gotta go big. You can't go with no $500 in a jersey. You can't go with no outboard engine. You gotta go with millions and millions. So it is not that the Indian community is not susceptible to vote buying, but the price is high. The price is high. You see, I hear of members of the government, sending hampers into East Indian community every month. And the hampers don't just get food inside. They get money in the hampers. So people look forward to these hampers, not for the food, but for the money that's there in the hamper. So vote buying is occurring among all the ethnic groups, but it's being done differently. The vote buying in the Indian community is a long-term investment and a long-range investment that you start to send in the hampers with the money 5 years before the election. Whereas in the African community and the Amerindian community, you come at election time and you say, here is some money. Here is, I hear for as low as $60,000, you could buy an African vote. When I talked to my colleagues and friends in Trinidad, they said yes. Yes. So the Calypsonian captures the issue about vote buying. And the problem with vote buying is when you start to buy votes in an election, there's no stopping. Because people now realize that election is a business, that I have something that can be sold. I have something that somebody wants to buy. And so therefore, the vote is not this sacred thing anymore. In the sense that people are prepared to trade their vote. And this has become a problem because you cannot talk about democratic election when there is open vote buying. As I said, GCOM, at the last election, if you all remember, GCOM put out a statement warning that vote buying is a crime. Now, they didn't follow through, but they must have been prompted by evidence of vote buying. And so, this issue of vote buying is captured by the Calypsonian, and the Calypsonian is being censored in Trinidad for vote buying. Let's for those of you who are joining us a little bit late, let's listen to a little bit more of Queen.
For sale. Somebody pinch me. Hey. On les commerces. was liming with some old men before the election. And well, I was amazed of their discussion. They were discussing the election of 2025. How Africans were selling sheep and UNC buying dead or alive. One old man shout out, fellas, give me your attention. UNC can't win by themselves, no election. You see, they're sitting and they're planning to make a decision. So she called out Shilaga, the old FIFA wanted man. She said, call the trade union, let we start negotiations. And we could call out a big sale and we go buy out some Africans. Africans for sale, we buying the buying. Africans for sale, for sale, for sale, we buying Africans. She don't have all she lal chance, and she knew no rhymes. Now all she need is some slave names, man, some big strong Africans. Africans for sale, we buy it. Africans for sale, for sale, for sale, so they go on Trinidad. UNC sitting and they're waiting patiently. With about 16 safe seats, they don't win that already. The woman said, I have my people, and they are born UNC. Now all I need is some Africans who got their names out of slavery. She said that she hear they're really selling cheap. And she could buy them very cheap, 500 and a jersey. A lot of people will cry when she's finished with CPEP. Cause she is not holding back them PNM have nothing to get. She said it's party before country, all you never, never forget. She will fend for her people and she have no blasted regrets. Africans for sale. We buying Africans, the Africans for sale, they coming, we buying Africans. They like crab in a barrel, they pulling each other down. She said, but I want the vote, so I jam them the winning song. Africans for sale, for sale, for sale, we buying good or bad. Africans for sale, for sale, sale, so they go on Trinidad.
Africans for sale, we buying good or bad. And we want big, strong Africans, you know. Very clever Calypso, very clever Calypso. Because the Calypsonian there is making the comparison with slavery. The comparison with slavery. They wanted the big and strong Africans. Very, very clever Calypso that is using history and using imagery in order to make the point. The point that democracy is being stymied by vote buying. I want to condemn vote buying. I've done it in the past and I'm doing it again. It's an insult to the people who you're going to enticing them to sell their votes. It's an insult to their dignity. It's an insult to the sanctity of the vote. The vote is not something to be played with. People died for the right to vote. People died en masse for the right to vote. People suffered for the right to vote. During slavery, you couldn't vote. During colonialism, you couldn't vote. So people struggled and died for the right to vote. And you ought not, if you're a serious political person or a serious political party, you ought not to go there if somebody come to you and try to sell you their vote. You ought to tell them no. If somebody out of impoverishment Because when people are poor, they're tempted to do things that they would not do. So if somebody come and try to sell you their vote as a political party, you should tell them no. But when you are encouraging them to come and to sell their vote, then you are desecrating the sanctity of the vote. And then, of course, it's inimical to democracy. Because if you are a governing party, or even if you're not a governing party, but you have access to plenty money, then it's easy for you to go and entice people to sell their votes. And so you have an uneven, you have a very uneven and exaggerated position in the race, because you are able to get in front because of your money. The observers talked about government party having access to government money. And if they have access to government money, then you have to assume that they're using government money to buy votes. And then we have people in the society, mega rich people, plenty money, because they're getting the money because they're friends and family and favorites. And they have money that they never really work for. They have excess money that they can pay to buy votes. And so this vote buying thing is a slap in the face of democracy. It cannot help democracy. I know people in this country have been talking about campaign finance reform. I support that. But I also support legislation going alongside campaign finance reform, legislation to make it difficult to buy votes. Legislation that says very clearly, define what is vote buying. Because I do take the point that if I'm trying to influence you to get your vote, that we ought to make a distinction between that and going to you and say, here is some money, I want your vote. No. So we need legislation to make vote buying a crime, to make it difficult for parties and individuals to buy vote, and to have stiff penalty for it, and to have to give the authorities the capacity to enforce the laws. We cannot be talking about a modern society. We cannot be talking about democracy. We cannot be talking about the fastest growing economy in the world. And we are into the backwardness of vote buying. And so I'm sounding the warning here that it is one of the issues that I intend to take up and that I intend to encourage my colleagues to take up. Because it is destroying the moral fabric of our politics. It is enticing our people to sell their dignity. My colleague, Professor Clive Thomas, in the 1970s, a small booklet called Bread and Justice. And he said in that pamphlet, do not trade justice for bread. Yes, you want bread. Struggle. We must struggle for bread. We must struggle for better price for labor. We must struggle for better pay, better salaries. But we must not allow ourselves to become victims to those who want to trade our dignity for bread. The Calypsonians said the first stop in the vote buying was the trade union. They bought over the trade union leaders. Trade unions are prepared to trade their justice for bread. If you trade your justice for bread, then that bread is not real bread. Martin Carter, the poet, said the mouth is muzzled by the food it eats. So if all of us want food, workers want food, all citizens want food, but if the food is going to muzzle you, then it's not good food. The mouth is muzzled by the food it eats. And if the mouth is muzzled by the food it eats, then the food is bad food. Bad food. So we have to attack this question of vote buying. As I said, you know, there's a thin line between trying to influence the vote and actual buying the vote. You know, if a supporter comes up to me at a meeting and says, Dr. Hines, I have nothing to buy dinner for the children tonight or breakfast for them tomorrow, and I give that person a small raise, that is not vote buying. That's already my supporter, but they're in a bad state. We cannot call that vote buying. Vote buying is when you say to people, if you come to my meeting, if you vote for me, then here is your money. I understand the PPP was in the habit of giving them half the money before and then give them the other half when they show proof that they voted for PPP. And we know that some African people actually took out pictures of their ballots to show the PPP. So that suggestion, that charge is not untrue. So this issue is a serious issue. And it is unfortunate that in Trinidad, they're trying to muzzle the Calypsonian from raising this issue. Because the Calypsonian has a mega mic and can raise issues. As you all know, I raise the issue of reparations and the International Decade of the People of African Descent in the National, and I did it deliberately. This budget that we just finished, this budget that we just finished in 2 weeks, they're telling me that it is perhaps the most watched budget debate in the history of post-colonial Guyana. And so there was a captive audience. And so when you speak into Parliament now, you're not just speaking among parliamentarians, you're speaking to the society at large. And I deliberately raised the issue in the Parliament. And I did it because I could do it. Because there is a lot that could happen if people raise that issue. If parliamentarians raise that issue, they'll be labeled. Well, one of the good things is that they have already labeled me. So by sending me to Parliament, I am free. I am free to raise those issues. And I use that freedom in order to raise the issue of reparations and the International Decade of the People of African Descent. And I raise it to point to the world that we are a multi-ethnic society. I grew up hearing that we're the land of many waters, the land of many people, and the land of 6 races. Yet people say that we should not talk race in the land of 6 races. I remember in the old days, they used to have problems with water in the 1970s, and the WPA would come to Buxton to keep meetings. And I remember Moses Bagwan, one of the WPA founders, saying, in the land of many waters, there's a shortage of water. And I remember as a little boy, I found that so creative. You know, you're 15, 16-year-old, and here is Moses saying, in the land of many waters, there's a shortage of water. And I'm saying here in 2026, in the land of 6 races, you are prohibited from talking about race. Well, I have decided I will not be prohibited from talking about race. I will protect my colleagues by taking it upon myself to speak to that issue of race, in particular to the condition of African people. And to say that in this transition from early post-colonialism to a petro-state, we have to look after the condition of all our people, all our children. We have to look after their condition as workers. We have to look after their condition as gender, men and women. Like I said, women have some problems in the society, and the government is not dealing with these issues. Women should not be in a workforce where they have to leave and go and work at night. Not in a country like Guyana. Maybe in some other country. But in a country like Guyana, where invariably it's the women who have to take care of the children. And a woman has to put on a uniform, left 5 o'clock in the afternoon to go and watch some rich person place, some business. First of all, exposing them because they don't carry gun. They don't carry firearm to defend themselves. And so, as watchmen, watchwomen, they are susceptible to the dangers of the night. But more than that, they leave their children at home. Your children, and nowadays my children, are vulnerable too. They leave them to the ravages of the night. And often when the children get bad, they say, well, at the moment, she not take care, she not watch over, she pick, but she has to go and watch people house at night. When your children are taken advantage of, the mother is the mother that get blamed, but you are taking the mothers out of their homes. And if you were talking about a modern society and a developing society, those are things that you have to protect women. And one of the ways of protecting them is, I'm not saying that women should not be guards, but put them to work during the day. Put them to work in shifts that they can take care of their children, get them together to go to school the next day, the same day, sorry. And then let them get home in time, that they can see them home from school to help them with their homework and other things, and to protect them at nights. So I'm not saying that women should not be guards. They will tell me that that's not a free society. People should be free to do any work, and maybe some women like to be guards. But I'm saying, consider the nature of the society and put them on shifts that they don't have to be exposing themselves and their children to dangers in the society. And so gender is an issue that as a government we must look at. How do we spend money to protect women? How do we manage the workforce in a way that women are protected and empowered? So we have workers, class, we have gender, men and women, and we are also divided by ethnicity. We are divided by ethnicity, and we have to look at the ethnic inequalities in the society. You can't have a society where one or two ethnic groups are dominating other ethnic groups. That is a recipe for disaster. That is a recipe for instability. And so we have to deal with the ethnic question. Black people's issues, a lot of them are unique to Black people. They're unique to them because of the history and because the society could not deal with those issues. We came out of slavery and black people had no time to reflect on what happened to them. They came out of slavery, book, colonialism. They had to start fighting now. They buy the villages and they were not left alone. Their villages were undermined by the state. They had to protect their villages. Eventually, they had to run from their villages and run into the towns because the village economy was undermined and in many regards destroyed. So, black people have not had time to settle down and to reflect on centuries of oppression. And the social relations of slavery were passed on to the colonial regime. The same social relations. Bob Marley puts it well, no chains on my feet, but still I'm not free. So the chains were removed from the feet, but the chains, the structural change, the institutional chains remain there. Remain there. And we move from colonialism to post-colonialism. The colonials are gone. They left us these plantations. Sugar, they call it monoculture. Economies that depend on one major product. They left us with sugar. And sugar prices start to fall on the world market. So that we inherit the same kind of social relations, the same kind of poverty in our post-colonial era. And so it's no accident that today we are screaming to the world how much money we have, but then we have to contend with the high level of poverty. And institutionally, it's much more rooted. The roots are deeper in the black community because the impoverished started long before our Indian comrades came here, our Portuguese comrades came here, our Chinese comrades came here. And so the impoverishment in the Amerindian communities and the African communities, the roots are ROOTS, are deeper. And for African people, they're different because those roots happened within the context of chattel slavery, where the African became a commodity, lost his or her humanity. Our Amerindian brothers and sisters were not enslaved. They were oppressed. They were exposed to genocide, but thank God, they were not enslaved. And so even though the roots are very deep in the Amerindian community and the African community, the roots are different in the African community because of the institution of slavery. And so we bring in the modern era those inequalities. When I was in grad school, we talked about equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. That we fought for all groups to have the same opportunity, to give them a chance to have the same outcome. But we recognize that that model was insufficient. Because in order to have equality of opportunity, you have to have equality of condition. We are seeing that with contracts. That it is those who have the infrastructure who are able to take advantage of the opportunities that come for contracts. If you don't have the necessary infrastructure, the necessary capital, you're not able to take advantage of the opportunity. So in order for us to have equality of opportunity, we have to have equality of condition. So equality of condition is what we have to struggle for. And that is why under the Granger administration, they said 30% of the contract should go to small contractors, meaning contractors in the African community, the Amerindian community, and so on. The PPP government doesn't honor that contract. They don't. And so we have to look at each ethnic group and to see what their peculiar circumstances are. Amerindian people have some peculiar circumstances because of where they live. They live in the hinterland. We call it the bush. There's some things that are expensive on the coast, and then they've got to transport those goods into the interior. Can you imagine what the price is in the interior? If they're expensive on the coast, where they're produced, when you now got to go in the interior, can you imagine what the prices are? And so therefore, the situation of Amerindians, because they're the majority of people in the hinterland, is unique to their geographical space. And even on the coast, the geographical space of the races is important. Most Africans live in old villages. And those old villages, the village economy has floundered a long time. A lot of our people have to go to town to work. A lot of them have to move to town. And so there is no longer a thriving village economy in the by our Indian brothers and sisters. The economies in those newer villages are different from the economies in the African villages. And so each village, each group, has to have the unique gaze of the state and the government. You go into African villages, they're teachers, they're nurses insofar as they work. They're teachers, they're nurses, they're housewives, and housewives work. They got to take care of children. They got to cook, they got to clean. So you go into those communities, they're teachers, they're nurses, policemen and women, housewives. And so they need, they're wage earners. As far as they engage in business, is selling things in little stands. And we don't want to know the money that they carry home when the night come after sitting on all day. All day. Because often they're competing, they're selling the same thing. And so that is what you see in the African villages. And if you're talking about the revival of Africans economically, you have to take into consideration their condition. I was talking to a young lady today, and she has the flu, and the place is very dusty because they're doing the road and so on. And she was advised that the dust could influence negatively on the lungs and so on, and advised to wear a mask. And she said she wore the mask for 1 or 2 days, but the heat, because she's there in the hot sun, and wearing the mask in that heat become uncomfortable. And that is what our women who are trying to make a penny, those are the conditions they have to deal with. There's no AC. They sit down in those things. Some of those things are made with zinc. The little shop them, I forgot the name you all call them. And so they have to deal with that heat. And they have to deal with dust. And they're sitting down there sometimes 10, 12 hours a day. And when you ask them what they're taking home in the night, you don't even want to hear sometimes. And so when I made the plea that we ought to look at the condition of African people, I'm also saying, look at the conditions of Amerindian people. But Amerindian people are making representation. Their leaders are all sides of the house. And I had occasion to say to the Africans on the PPP side publicly and also privately is that how can you sit in a government and see $1.5 trillion being shared up and you're angry because your brother says, give some to Africans as Africans? What manner of African are you? Kwame McCoy tell me that he give his salary to a black man sometime. God bless Kwame, and God bless the person who benefited from Kwame's salary. But here is the story. They don't want handouts. What they want are jobs and good paying jobs. What they want is money that they can move from selling in a little tin stand at the corner of the street to opening a business that can bring in income and extra money that they can invest. And they don't want, see, all of us do that. I was forced to let the world know that I do not touch 1 cent of my parliamentary salary for personal use. I turn it over to the WPA, and we help in causes every day. Every day, I help in some cause or the other, every single day, without exaggeration. And I don't have to climb on a soapbox and talk about that. That is my duty. As someone who's a product of this very impoverishment that I see around me every day, in small ways that I can help somebody to buy a loaf of bread, I see that as duty. And so I don't have to talk about, but every day, and I have to say that parliamentary salary, and it's not a salary, it's a stipend, is $300,000. In case people talking about some big money. But I do not touch 1 cent of it. I thank God that I have other means of sustenance. I'm now a retiree, so I'm living on retirement income. I don't have an active income because I ain't working no way. So retirement income. And I know some of my brothers and sisters, members of parliament, they don't have other jobs because, they're in the wrong party. And so I am not saying that all parliamentarians should do what I do. I do it because I could afford to do it. I have other forms of sustenance. And so the condition of our people in their communities must determine how you spend and what you spend on them. And so the problem with this budget and the problem with the government itself, it is not being clinical about how it peruses our plural society. There is an attempt there's an attempt in the Indian community to grapple with some of the Indian problems. Gaisuco, $30 billion. Gaisuco doesn't bring money into Guyana. The government subsidizes Gaisuco. In fact, The government subsidizes those people who buy Gaisuco sugar. Because when we export the sugar to Europe, we are producing sugar at 40 cents a pound, and sugar on the world market is selling for 16 cents, 14 cents a pound. When we sell that sugar, we are subsidizing the Europeans and other people who are buying our sugar. But sugar is very vital to Indian families. And so, in a sense, the government is catering to the condition of Indian people and subsidizing that industry. You're indirectly subsidizing East Indians. And nothing is wrong with that so long as you do it for others. Of course, there's a small minority of sugar workers who are black people, but they're in the minority. The Indians are in the majority. And I know business, we will say we have to run Gaisuco as a business. And I suppose the coalition started to do that, the PPP come in and stop it. But if you're not going to run it as a business and you're going to subsidize it, you must know that in effect you're subsidizing one ethnic group. And if you're going to subsidize sugar workers, why not subsidize public servants? The majority of them are Africans. They are Indian public servants, but they're the minority. Why not subsidize teachers? The teachers need a lot of subsidy. Nurses, why not subsidize them if you're going down the road of subsidy, which in effect you're doing, because you're subsidizing sugar. There is some subsidy for rice farmers. There is some subsidy for fishermen and women. In effect, you're subsidizing one race. And in the case of sugar, you're doing it to an industry that is not bringing in income. Rice brings in income. Rice brings in sugar doesn't bring in any income for us in terms of what we said. 88% of our foreign currency earnings, 88% of what we earn from external trade is oil. And the other 11% come from rice, gold, and one other product, rice, gold, and bauxite. 11, that's 88 and 11, 99. And 1% from everything else. Let me repeat those numbers for you all. 88% of foreign earnings from foreign trade, comes from oil. 11% comes from bauxite, mainly African Guyanese in the bauxite industry. Gold, I think that's mixed. Indians, Africans, Portuguese, all them in the gold story. And bauxite, gold, and rice, predominantly Indian. And 1% from everything else. So when you are pumping that amount of money in oil and sugar and fish and so on, you're really giving them a subsidy. All right, if that's your policy, then give the subsidy across the board. Give it across the board. To transition from sugar to something else, they tell you it takes about 20 years, 12 to 20 years for you to transition from one crop to another crop, one product to another product. I remember I used to visit St. Lucia and some of the banana growing countries in the Eastern Caribbean. And they were telling them to transition from banana to start planting pepper and planting this and planting that. And the problem was that transition would have taken 12 years. The economists said 12 to 20 years. And they couldn't say what these people will do within that time, the 12 years. Some people had started to go out of the banana business and go into marijuana farming. And then the Americans come down on them. So I am saying I understand to transition out of sugar takes careful planning. And at least the coalition had started to do that. And the PPP raised all set of problems. How the government knock off 7,000 workers. How the this, the that. And they come in and realize that at some point we have to transition out of sugar. If it were not for oil, we would be in shit creek. If it were not for oil, where the money to transition thing? And the coalition government pumped plenty money into sugar. I don't have the direct figure, but it was upwards of $30 million just in the first year. So, sisters and brothers, these are the issues that we have to grapple with as a country. The budget is over. The budget estimate, as I said, 2 weeks to consider budget, to debate it, and then go through the estimates. Woefully inadequate. I think at a minimum, we need to have 6 weeks, at a minimum. And I've said that last night, and I'm repeating it again tonight. But we have to, as an opposition, with a minority in the National Assembly, and so we're not going to be able to influence laws at that level, but we have to do our oversight. We must not allow this budget to die in our consciousness. We must keep it on. It's $1.558 trillion. We can allow it to get out of our gaze. We have to keep on it. We have to keep exposing, and we have to keep preparing ourselves to take government. Whether as part of a grand coalition, whether as part of a limited coalition, power becomes important. And our voters have to be much more nimble in terms of what you do with your vote. I come back to the selling of votes. I do not believe that all the black votes the PPP got, they got a few. I do not believe all of them were bought. I do not believe that all of the votes that migrated from the PNC/APNU were bought. I do not believe that for 1 second. But what I do believe is that vote buying was part of the mix. And we have to, as an African, I cannot rebuke Amerindians. I don't have the authority to do that. But I think that I can rebuke Africans who were being enticed. I do not believe an African person gets up and say, I am going out and selling my vote. I do not believe that for 1 second. I think African people are much more dignified than to wake up one morning and say, I'm going to sell my vote. But what some of us may have done is that we have fallen for the enticement. And I condemn the enticers. They're the ones who get 90% of my condemnation. Those who deliberately, the political parties and individuals who deliberately say that black people are vulnerable and are going and buy the vote. They get 90% of my denunciation. But I also have to warn my own people to beware of those enticers. Brother Bob, talked about, here comes the con man with his con plan. He says everything that we know is what they teach us. There's always the con man coming with the con plan. And our people have to be vigilant, more vigilant. I will die for the right of people to decide where they're putting their votes, who they will vote for. That's not my issue. That's not my issue. My issue is when people try to trick you. Again, Bob Marley said, I don't want my people to be tricked by mercenaries. Brother, you're right. You're so right. I don't want my people to be contrary. I don't want my people to be tricked by mercenaries. And they're mercenaries. Mercenaries out there who are preying on you. And we must say like our old people, water, knock away me lap 2 times. If we got tricked once, we have to begin now to say, not 2 times. No sabi. No sabi. Water knock away me lap 2 times. Because when mercenaries trick you, they leave you in a weaker condition collectively. In a weaker connection collectively. The PPP there in Parliament, every speaker, because the APNU side stood up to them in Parliament. And their comeback is, that is why you all reduced to 12 seats. They're laughing at us, or so they think. Because we are standing up to them, we are 12, and we stand up, and they're laughing. They're laughing. Kya, 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 kya. It's laugh joke for them. Laugh joke. And I hope our people are hearing. Because when they laugh, it's all you they're laughing to. Because they're saying, how could you do that to your own? How could you do that to your own? And they know that they targeted you with vote buying. So, sisters and brothers, that's my message here for tonight. I want us to stand firm. Stand firm. Don't give up. A lot of people are beginning to despair. A lot of people are wondering what will happen. What will happen to the poor? What will happen to Amerindian people? What will happen to African people? And ultimately, what will happen to Indian people? The Indian poor? Who may feel protected today, but poverty has a way of penetrating politics. So I say to those of you who are hearing my voice tonight, to stand firm. Do not give up. Do not give up. Because that's what they want us to do. They want us to give up. They want us to say that we are not worth living as a free people. And my message is that freedom is something that is vital to the human spirit. Without freedom, we are not full human beings. And so we strive to be free. Dr. Walter Rodney says, if someone comes to you and says, here is freedom, they can come tomorrow and say, give me back that freedom that I give you. And so we have to learn to struggle for our freedom. We have to learn to take blows, and we have to learn to give back blows. Because power concedes nothing without a demand. Frederick Douglass concedes nothing without a demand. I end tonight with a tribute to Jesse Jackson, one of the giants of the world civil rights movement, one of the giants of the American civil rights movement, one of the giants of the African race. I remember so well Jesse Jackson in 1984, daring to run for president. Others had tried it before. Charlie Chisholm in 1972, our own Caribbean sister. But Jesse in 1984 mounted a serious challenge in America. And in doing so, he signaled that the African in America was worth taking seriously. The African America should be taken seriously. He was using the bully pulpit of the presidential race to sound that warning. In 1988, he went at it again. And I remember to this day, that speech that he gave at the Democratic Convention, where he described America as a quilt with different pieces of cloth, as a society that must include and not exclude. And I remember as a young African man, a young black man, seeing my worth being given currency. He continued after those campaigns to nurture the community, to nurture African people in America, always saying, I am somebody, I am somebody. And we have to say we are somebody because somebody sometime said we were nobody. He toiled and he toiled. And whatever our condition is today, as a black race, as black people, as African people, Jesse would have left us today better than when he came into this world in 1941. In 1941, when he was born in America, there was segregation. Black people could not eat at the same lunch counter as white people. Black people could not go to the same school as white people. Black people were considered unequal in America. And throughout his lifetime, he lived through Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. He lived through to see Rosa Parks refusing to go to the back of a bus, sparking the last stretch to rail freedom. He saw the rise of a young preacher to become the Messiah of the black man in America and beyond. He lived through massive resistance when white people refused to open schools rather than allowing black children to sit next to their children. He lived through that. He lived through the sit-ins at the lunch counters in the early 60s. He participated in it. He saw the Civil Rights Act of 1964. He saw the Voting Rights Act of 1965. He was there at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis in April of 1968 when Dr. Martin Luther King, after telling the world that he was fearing no man and that he had seen the promised land and that he may not get there with us, but as a people we would get there. Jesse was there when they gunned him down, the Prince of Nonviolence. Jesse was there when America burned. Over 100 cities burned because they killed Dr. King. He was there for the Poor People's March, which was the brainchild of Dr. King. He was there. He saw America try to condemn the black man to permanent third-class citizen, and he played his part. He was there in 2008 when the ancestors sent forth a young black man and said, go forth and open doors for your people. Barack Obama rose to the presidency of the United States. Jesse was there. If there was not a Jesse Jackson in 1984 and 1988, there would not be a Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012. Sometimes we are hard on our own leaders, we black people. Sometimes we want perfection. We are human beings, and so we have our imperfections. But Jesse Jackson carried the burden of the black man in America and the world on his shoulders, on his face, and on his mind. And today, he took his flight. The Rasta man said, one bright morning when work is over, I'll fly away and fly away home. Our Congo brothers and sisters say, Congo Creole, see them a go away. One be one. You have taken your flight, Brother Jesse. We who are left behind must continue to fly your flag, the red, green, and gold of Marcus Garvey, always reminding us that men like yourself walked this earth. We are stronger. Even though they want to weaken us, we are stronger because your blood runs through our veins. What good, my brother? Say hello to Dr. King and Ralph Abernathy and Stokely Carmichael and Fannie Lou Hamer and the legions of African-American freedom fighters were sitting there in ancestor land to welcome you with open arms. We love you, Jesse, even from afar as Guyana, even from this land where trials and tribulations face the African. We say thank you. Thank you. Love. Always. We are somebody. We are somebody. You taught us that in word and deed. And now we must move forward in unity to make good on the promises that you were not able to fulfill.